The idea of the New Jerusalem is mentioned in, I guess, the book of Revelations in the Bible. And I would say my interest in it is not as much in that it talks about the New Jerusalem, but that to me the New Jerusalem is the fulfillment of something that I experience myself as being part of. And I would guess that probably all of us are part of too, whether we have any sense that or not. And that's that. There was a coming together of many beings in an ancient time with the intent to answer a call that came out of the Spirit to continue a process that had started in another world. And that process that started in another world was that world had been changed in its process, in its way that karma would be worked and that growth would take place, and that God's intent that souls would have come into this creation and experienced it for God and then gone back into God so that God could know what God had created. And in this other world, a movement had taken place where the approach to learning, the approach to karma, the approach to life had been shifted. And it had been shifted away from an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, the law of cause and effect, or what's often called the law of karma, based on the principle of the need for balance, that all things needed to come into balance, and that the fulfillment of God's purpose was in that balance occurring. And in this world, another option had been extended, which was an option that the focus would come away from the purpose of balance and would come then instead to the purpose of learning. For God's intent in doing all this was that God would learn, and that God's agents of learning, these individuations of itself, of God, we term the soul, would be able to learn, to participate and grow through the process of participating in physicality and participating in created conditions. And so this focus on learning then was brought into that world as an option. And in that world as it brought into option, there was conflict, because that which had been in place had been in place for a long time, and it resisted this movement and this change from this older way of doing it, which demanded balance and demanded retribution and demanded justice and demanded that everything had to be equalized according to a principle of fairness and a principle of right. And in this other world, learning became the paramount thing. And with this movement to learning being the paramount thing, there was also a new process that was brought forward, and that was the process of forgiveness. And with it, the process of grace. Because it was recognized that the absolute necessity to balance everything exactly to the scale of what had happened was not required if the learning was taking place. And so this planet went through a process of gradually moving through a long period of time from under this law-based way of dealing with existence into this love-based way of dealing with existence, where the learning became the paramount truth. And the success on that planet was magnificent and was complete. And yet in the completing of that, there was the recognition that the work was not done for all of creation and all the parts of creation that were meant to receive this new opportunity. And so the next place that it was decided this could take place was this planet we call Earth. And so there's a gathering, a meeting place on that planet where it was laid out what would happen, and there was the answering of many beings, many souls who agreed to partake in that. Even though they had already come into this new opportunity on this other world, they agreed to move from that experience into this planet, and in the process to come back under the law and come back under the dominant theme that was in this world, and just, in a sense, plant the seed, plant the beginnings of that opportunity that could then flourish at some time and place for this planet where this new opportunity, this new way could flourish. And this planet could move out from under law and come under the grace and come under this opportunity of forgiveness, where the learning and the growth would be the paramount purpose. And so we're in the midst of that now. And there are so many souls in the world now that came from that time. And the book of Revelations talks about the 144,000 souls who the Lamb has anointed, and they're part of his action, that his name is written in their forehead. And that they can never be separated from the Lamb because they're already part of the Lamb. Well, the Lamb is, of course, reference to the Christ in the Bible. And that's the one I'm talking about, and this action that's taking place. And we're in a time on our planet where the emergence of this Christ opportunity and its movement to the many is occurring. Now, it didn't just start on our planet when Jesus showed up. These 144,000 souls came into the incarnation pattern of this planet long ago. And because of the power of the consciousness that was here and the way life was working and karma was being worked, these souls inevitably came back under the influence of the law, and for a while wandered in this world as if they were just as forgetful, just as lost as many of the other beings that were here. But deep within them there was this place that had already come awake. And so it was just, in some sense, waiting to be reactivated. And then, over time, there were special adventing of this Christ Spirit into the world to activate the seeds that have been planted with these beings. And the Bible, in a sense, is very much a story of that. If you go to Adam in the Bible, it's really what they're talking about. It's the Christ Spirit being activated there. And there's other things get talked about in it. And the master forms that came forward. And it didn't just start with Jesus, but Jesus was a particular flowering of this Christ purpose, like it was being touched in piece by piece. And if you go chronologically through masters that predated Jesus, you would see it with them. You would see it with Melchizedek and Enoch, and part of the lineages of the Bible, and other masters that were all tilling the soil and watering the seeds and doing what they could to a time of flowering. But when Jesus performed what he performed, it became an activation where now the seeds are really going to sprout. And so we're starting to see that. And then we're starting to see the seeds sprout and the collective effect of that. Now, the master form that came as Jesus was a master form that was leading that meeting back on the other planet. In that world, he was called Sananda. But it didn't matter what name, because it wasn't about a name or identification. It was about an intent of God being fulfilled. And so we're in a time of that coming about that is quite powerful and exceptional. Then I think we all look around and go, yeah, this is different. What's going on our planet? In some ways we say some things seem darker than ever, but the collective light and the collective number of people that are truly wanting to awaken and to see is so different than things were before.